Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. So glad you're joining me. This is the second day working on this quilt. Well, I say second day working on this quilt. I've actually been working on the design and the math phase of this quilt for a couple of days, working with my client to verify and just make sure everything is exactly right before I even begin this part. But this is the actual second day of working with her shirts. And I have 5 larger pieces of stabilizer ready to go for the next row. I like to cut my stabilizer a couple inches larger on all the sides than what my finished block will be, so that when I trim my 14-inch block, the stabilizer will go from edge to edge. And look at this. When I do that, when I pre-cut my stabilizer, I have all of these really useful scraps left over, so I put them in a bin and save them, because when I get to the border portion of this quilt, I won't have to cut pieces of stabilizer from the large bolt. I can patch together the smaller scraps and be able to use all of my stabilizer, and then these pieces don't go to waste. So I always keep those scraps. And so yeah, it looks like it's going to rain today, so I might have to close my door and turn on the AC. But that's okay. That'll be the first time this year that I've done that. The last couple of days have been in the 80s, so it's been really toasty in here, but I've held off on turning on the air conditioning, but that might get used today. So, yep, that's what I'm doing today. I'm stabilizing my shirts, getting all those rows cut out, and when we meet back, I'm expecting to have all the blocks put on the wall. And at that point, I'm going to stop and take a picture and send it to my client in case she wants to switch any of the blocks around. We can do it at that point before I begin sewing this quilt top together. So, yep, that's what I'm doing today. I'm glad you're with me and joining me throughout my day. And I'll see you when I have a little bit more done. Here we are. This is the last shirt that I have to add stabilizer to and cut out. So I thought I would bring you along and we'll do this last one together as we celebrate putting the stabilizer on these shirts and finishing that part up. Not that it's hard, it's just time consuming. And the steam from the iron, I always feel like I'm in a sauna. So I'm always glad to get that part out of the way. So here's my last logo. I'm just going to flip it over. Just sort of center that right on my pressing board there. Our pressing board, I think, is about 15 inches from top to bottom, and our block is going to be 14 inches, or cut to 14 and a half. So I'm just going to place that sort of right in the middle of my board, and you can kind of see the logo from the back side. I'm going to grab a scrap piece of fabric. You could use muslin or cotton, and my stabilizer that I've already pre-cut. We'll just center that, eyeball it right in the middle of that logo, and then cover that up with the fabric. Make sure that it's nice and smooth, and we're just going to press that. And I'm using the highest cotton setting with the highest steam setting, and it just takes a few seconds going over the entire back to fuse that stabilizer right into place, just like this. It only really takes a minute, but when you have 35 shirts to do, it can take a good part of your day. Just like this. That steam really creates a lot more heat and really fuses that stabilizer right on the back of your shirt. So just like that, we can remove the fabric that's on there really well. And I'm going to remove my pressing board, and we're going to cut this block out together. So here I have my 15-inch ruler. I do not have a ruler that's exactly 14.5 inches, and that's what I'm cutting my blocks to. So what I've done is just taken some painter's tape and taped off this last 1/2 inch here on one side and a 1/2 inch at the bottom. And so now I can visually see 14.5 inches, which helps me line up my logo in the block. I've also marked with a Sharpie a long time ago the center place for 14.5 inches, which is 7 1/4. So I can kind of get a fast placement with my square ruler for this block. Here's my t-shirt logo. The lighting might be a little off because I have the door open and it's really bright coming through there. I think the rain is going to hold off for a little while, which is nice. Let's make sure that's nice and flat. I'll take her little note off the bottom so it'll lay flatter. So I'll bring in my ruler. I'm hoping this all fits in the camera. Here's my reference point for the center, so I can start to line it up that way, just eyeballing it. And then I'm going to pay real close attention to this space on the sides just to make sure that it's pretty centered in the block. So here I have 1, 2 3/4, 1, 2 1/2. So it could go over this way just a tad bit. Have you ever noticed, if you've done t-shirt quilts, that sometimes the logos are kind of not put on the shirt exactly square? I find that more times than not. So now we're at 1, 2 1/2, 1, 2 1/2, just like that. So now I just want to find some reference points to make sure that it's nice and straight. So we're going to look at the top of this emblem here. You might be able to see that's right at the 4-inch mark, and over here it comes up just a tiny bit. This larger part is what we're going to make sure that the block is nice and straight. So we'll shift it just like that. You can pause the video and take a really good close look at that if you want, but you can see how fast the square rulers with all the lines on them help you to make sure that your block is nice and straight. I'm going to cut off all of the extra at the bottom just like that, so I can cut, and you can't see the bottom portion of my mat, and I apologize about that. But I've just removed all of the extra that hangs about 2 inches past this ruler so that I can cut on my mat. So my first cut will be along the right side. Look how good that blade works. I'm almost embarrassed to talk about how poorly my blade was cutting before I replaced it yesterday. We're going to cut this top portion off, just like that. Make sure that's nice and straight. I wobbled a little bit. So we have the right and the top portion off, and now we need to cut this section. Because we're using the 15-inch ruler, cutting 14 1/2, I'm going to just remove the ruler and rotate this halfway around. You can see that I removed the tape at the very edges so that I can make sure that my lines of my block are lined up with the 14 1/2 inch mark. So now I can simply place the ruler back, make sure this line is matched up, and let's move you down some. I'm sorry. I don't know that it's all going to fit into the camera view here. Again, we're just going to line up 14 1/2 inches. This is lined up here, and right up here it's lined up at 14 1/2 inches. Nice and straight, and I can cut this portion off and that top portion now. And just like that, there's our 14 1/2 inch block. And this can be put right onto the design wall, and when I get these other 5 blocks up, I'll bring you in and let you get a good reveal of where we're at right now. And here we are, everyone. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning. So this is where we are. I have all of my blocks cut. You can see the size of this quilt so far. It's already pretty long. Now keep in mind, the quilt will shrink up a couple of inches as I sew all the blocks together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But it won't shrink up that much. Just a couple of inches, and then we're adding borders on top of that. So fairly large size quilts. And I think it looks fantastic. I love all of her logos. They're really bright and vibrant. They have a lot going on. It really adds a lot of interest to this quilt. So it doesn't even fit on my design wall, which my design wall is pretty small anyway. And I've had to move some bins around, and so my smaller workspace is being all shuffled around while I work on this quilt, but that's okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and snap a couple photos and send them to my client and see if she's happy with the placement, and if she wants to move anything around, we can do it at this part, and then once all of the blocks are sewn together, that's where they are. So now's a good time to make any changes if we need to. So I don't know if I will hear back from her before I need to finish up working for today or not. So I'm thinking that this might be all for today, but that's quite a bit of work for one day. And if I hear back and I can start sewing things together, I'll do that. If not, I'll be working this weekend. I'm about 2 days behind my work schedule from all of the things we're doing with our house. And so, yep, working on the weekend. That's what we do. Actually, it's not like working at all. Not when you love what you do. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you some point this weekend as I start sewing these rows together. Bye, everyone.